Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating story of unintended consequences, really a head-scratcher. It's about how U.S. tariffs, supposedly aimed at one country, may have accidentally handed a huge win to its biggest rival, China.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like a total paradox, doesn't it? I mean, how can you start a trade fight with a key ally, someone like India, and somehow end up helping your number one competitor? It just doesn't seem to add up. Well, let's break this thing down. All right, so to really get how this all went sideways, we've got to rewind a bit. We need to look at what the original game plan even was. And that all starts with this big, grand strategy playing out in the Indo-Pacific.
So, for a while now, the U.S. has been working on this thing called the Indo-Pacific Strategy. And the whole point, really, was to get a bunch of nations together, build a coalition. You know, the goal? To create a kind of counterweight to China's expanding influence in the region. And India? Well, India was supposed to be the linchpin, the key partner in making sure the region stayed free and open.
So you can see the strategic chessboard taking shape, right? On one side, the main goal is pretty clear. Build up a really strong US-India alliance to, put a check on China's expansion. But the big challenge, the elephant in the room, is China's just massive economic and manufacturing power across Asia. The whole idea was to boost India's economy to help balance that out. But then, right as this whole strategy is getting off the ground, something totally unexpected happens. A huge wrench gets thrown right into the gears. An economic hit. And it came from a place nobody really saw coming.
And boom, just like that, the U.S. slaps a 25% tariff on a whole bunch of key Indian exports. Now, you gotta understand, 25%, that's not just some small tax. That is a massive economic shock. It sent a completely contradictory message to a country that, remember, Washington was supposedly trying to court as a top-tier strategic ally.
And just look at what got hit. This wasn't random. These tariffs landed right on the heart of India's economy. We're talking about the engines of its growth and job creation. Things like textiles, gems, pharmaceuticals, electronics. The very industries that were supposed to power India up to help it become that strong economic alternative to China.
And the fallout? It was almost immediate. You could see it ripple across the Indian economy. I saw one analyst put it pretty bluntly. They said, investors are pulling back, the rupee is weakening, and growth forecasts are slipping. So think about that. The policy that was supposed to build up a strong ally was actually just making that ally economically weaker.
Okay, so if the move ends up hurting American businesses with higher prices, and it weakens a key partner like India, you have to ask, right? Who actually benefited from all this friction? Who was the unintended winner here? Now, if you just glance at the trade numbers, it looks pretty simple. U.S. importers trying to avoid these new tariffs just started buying more stuff from other countries, places like Vietnam or Indonesia. Imports from India go down, imports from these other places go up. Simple, right? But there's a catch. That is definitely not the whole story. And this is the crazy part. The hidden winner was often still China. Now, how does that work? Well, even if a U.S. company orders, say, a bunch of electronics from a factory in Vietnam, chances are the most valuable bits inside, the complex components, the microchips, and even the logistics to get them there are all orchestrated by Chinese companies. They're just so deeply integrated into Asia's supply chain that they can end up profiting no matter where the final assembly happens. This also completely messes with a major global business strategy you might have heard of. It's called China Plus One. The idea is that companies don't want all their eggs in one basket, so they're looking for a second country, a plus one, to diversify their manufacturing. And India was a prime candidate for that role. But when you suddenly make Indian goods 25% more expensive overnight, you make it a way less attractive option. And what does that do? It just pushes everyone back towards China. The damage here wasn't just about dollars and cents. It went way deeper. We're talking about major strategic fallout. It started to erode the one thing you absolutely need for a strong alliance: trust. You can almost see the dominoes fall, one by one. First, from an ally's perspective, the U.S. starts to look, unreliable. Like its policies are transactional and can just change on a whim. So what does a country like India do? It starts to hedge its bets. It pursues something called multi-alignment, which basically means strengthening ties with lots of different countries, not just the US. And who's there to take advantage of all that friction? You guessed it. China steps right in to boost its own diplomatic and economic ties.
And look, this is way bigger than just the US-India relationship. When the main player, the US, starts to look unreliable, it weakens the entire coalition. That whole free and open Indo-Pacific idea, it takes a hit. It's like handing a diplomatic advantage straight to Beijing, allowing them to frame themselves as the more stable, more predictable partner in the region.
So what you end up with is this counterproductive feedback loop. A situation where the strategy basically starts eating itself.
Just think about the cycle we've just walked through. It kicks off with US tariffs. Those tariffs weaken the Indian economy. That, in turn, actually strengthens China's relative position. And what's the end result? The original US strategy is completely undermined. It's a textbook strategic own goal. So let's just tie this all together, back to that paradox from the beginning. At the end of the day, what happened? Well, American consumers and businesses paid higher prices. India, the strategic partner the US was counting on, got economically weaker. US diplomatic clout in Asia went down. And, ironically, the one country this was all supposed to contain, China, actually saw its role as a manufacturing powerhouse and a regional leader get stronger. A strategy designed to check China ended up consolidating its power. And it all leaves us with a really big question, something to think about. In a world as globalized as ours, where supply chains and alliances are this tangled, complicated web, can any trade war ever be truly bilateral? Is it ever really just between two countries?